All right. Last week, I was back to where it all started, where I learned to really appreciate and truly develop my independent, critical thinking and communication skills. I was back at Lund University, the roots. I want to share 5 factors that this old university offered us students to propel our outside-the-box and creative thinking. You're probably asking, what does this have to do with me? I don't want to apply or reapply to a university. Fair enough, but you don't need to. Anyone can develop these skills in the right conditions with the right environment that emphasizes or capitalizes on healthy skepticism, open-mindedness, or open and clear dialogues. And look, I never had any traditional or elitist affinity to Lund University or any university whatsoever. Sure, I studied psychology and biomedicine at this university, but I was never the prototypical student. And I actually avoided any activity that I would consider too student-like, except for the student clubs with cheap beers, of course. I'm only human. But credit where credit's due. This is a homage to my old university, Lund University, a university we can all learn from when it comes to thinking and communication. But first, what are the flaws of many traditional schools or university that don't allow us to develop thinking skills and communication? Well, I've talked with a lot of students from different universities or schools from all around the world, and it has become clear to me that these lectures are often stale, professor-centric, or unidirectional. So, students learn by taking notes, knowing what the professors want, and memorizing stuff that they know the professors want them to memorize. So sure, we learn stuff, but do we learn to formulate our own thoughts or handle critique or draw our own conclusions? These 5 factors will create the right conditions for that. Check if you can spot the common threads between these 5 factors before I reveal them by the end.
Problem-based learning.
Problem-based learning, or PBL, was a cornerstone in my academic experience at Lund University, and in particular biomedicine. Unlike the traditional lecture-based approach, PBL immersed us in collaborative projects and group work where we tackled real-world problems. We weren't just passive recipients of information, but instead we would actively try to solve problems by using our theoretical knowledge to solve practical issues. We would delve into complex challenges, try to solve problems by using critical thinking, creativity, and teamwork. From this type of environment, we learned that it was the journey that was the important thing, not the destination itself. It gives you a sense of ownership.
Interdisciplinary studies.
I remember one of our professors in psychology was ranting one day about how the different fields were delineated and that these limitations between the fields were rigid and distinct. He described how humanists don't collaborate with scientists and psychology researchers don't use data from humanist studies. So yeah, these professors, they would recognize the value of collaborating between fields, and they would encourage us to go out and expand our views and find collaborations or connections between, let's say, 2 completely distinct fields. And that's why I combine knowledge from science, philosophy, psychology, communication, journalism, because they complement each other. For example, we cannot talk about scientific trust without understanding the psychology of people, or philosophical questions like value judgments, empirical judgments, or current politics. And journalism, the art of digging and conveying information to expose and combat injustices.
Switch side debating and presentations with opponents.
As I explained in my previous video about AI and critical thinking, switch side debating challenges you by making you argue for and against a particular perspective. So it forces you to understand your opponent's point of view, to open up your creativity and curiosity and knowledge within that topic. And during presentations with opponent, you would perhaps have to oppose arguments that you normally would agree with. It's difficult to progress intellectually without opposing views. Having someone else or yourself opposing your points of views or ideas solidifies your knowledge and arguments, or make you realize that you needed to replace them with other ideas. So we would have all this discussion in a non-judgmental environment, and the point was not to be correct. It was to truly understand your own opinions and that of others.
Independent experimentation.
Both my psychology courses and biomedicine program capitalized on independent experimentation, where students could learn by doing and failing. We created experiments, formulated hypotheses, arranged the proper controls, analyzed the outcomes, and presented them to professors and other students. For example, I remember in psychology, we would head out to the city center in Lund and ask random people to estimate the number of religious people in Sweden, and then prime their answers by anchoring either high or low numbers. We would ask half of the people if they thought it was higher or lower than 10%, and we would ask the other half if they thought it was higher or lower than 90%. And then we would compare their final guesses. As you can imagine, the estimated percentages were on average lower in the first group than in the second group. Then in biomedicine, we would experiment differently. We would use bacteria, mammalian cells, DNA, proteins, any organic material. But the idea was the same: formulate hypotheses, test them, analyze them, and then present them. Whether these results were correct or not, that didn't matter. What really mattered was preparing and performing the experiments. So beside all the concepts and processes that we learned, we also learned and trained in creativity without fearing failure. It gave us space to expand our imagination and try new stuff based on our knowledge, regardless of how ridiculous these ideas might have seemed at first.
An open and democratic learning environment.
I often hear former students talk about how they would wake up early in the morning, go to an auditorium, sit among other 100 students and listen to a professor and take notes for about 2 hours. And sure, that happens at Lund University as well, I guess. But I was lucky. Our professors didn't preach nonstop. They'd usually request engagement, ask for opinions, and ask us students to step up on the board and write down our ideas. Of course, the professors and teachers were the ones with the experience and the most knowledge, but still they would invite us to share our thoughts without judgment. It was more of a dialogue than preaching. Honest question, how common is this? So these professors would have knowledge gaps and biases as well, but they loved sharing their opinions with students. Also because it's not often that they get the chance to share their academic details with other people. So they would embrace these moments. But nevertheless, this type of attitude lowers the ivory tower and make these professors mortals all of a sudden. So these are the 5 factors. And by now you probably figured out the common thread between them. A non-judgmental atmosphere, democratic, flat and open discussions, learning to accept and embrace failure and critique. We can all develop these skills, and you don't have to enroll at Lund University or any university for that matter. It just takes some practice and patience, but you can start by subscribing to this channel, which will give you content that provokes your thought and communication. Why? Because it allows you to create your own questions, test hypotheses, and learn new stuff. And it allows you to discuss with others who may have different points of view without feeling offended or insulted every time. Anyway, what do you think? Did I miss any other invaluable trick? I'd be happy to read your opinions in the comments. Until next time, peace.